Hello, myself Sunil Ramakrishnan, and here basically we are discussing about the 183rd number, and 183rd basically that is the formula part number. So here basically we are discussing about the subscription plan which is taken by the government, and government is telling that we have taken the subscription plan according to the requirement which is given by the uh, admin department basically. Admin department of the energy department, that is basically the power company and the energy companies and the power companies, nuclear power plant basically, you can say nuclear power plant. So here basically we are discussing that how basically government collects the requirement. That is also a big question, that how basically government says that this tree has to be finished from this city. So how basically they decides, that is basically question. How basically one generation gets end, and how they decides basically the this generation has to end. For example, I will take one example. This type of thing basically never god family do, but then also basically I will take the example. In future it might possible that anybody might do this type of thing. For example, there is one god family. He basically created one person, and he was very dangerous person once upon a time. So his body was cloned, and his body was basically converted into this person's this god family's person's blood cells. So that was assumed that one blood cells was taken, and that from blood cells, that one blood cells from this human clone was cloned. This body was cloned. So here basically he, that person basically which was a human clone, he started basically his journey. Started his journey means he started his creation basically when he assumed that his identification was created. That is basically Aadhaar card and PAN card was created on the age of 23. So basically his age given was as a 23. Assume that. So, and this basically the government has done this. So just see basically up to what level the system is, that also we will see. Assume that his age was decided as a 23. So that person's age was 23 and he was basically young. In 23 basically you are basically very young, right? So he was 23. He started his generation. He done lots of job. He went to Mumbai. He went to Bangalore. He went to Andaman Nicobar. He went to Chennai. He went to Madras. Sorry, Chennai and Madras both are same. He went to Delhi. He went to Madhya Pradesh. He went to Uttar Pradesh. He went to um, Bihar. Then basically at last he settled his family. At last basically he settled basically in Vadodara city. Just taking as an example. In real basically he might be settled in Kerala, he might be settled in Bangalore. So just taking as an example. So he settled in Vadodara city. So now basically he settled in Vadodara city. Then basically he got married also. He basically got one girl and got married. And then basically they got married, and then basically they got two child. So two child with two boys basically. They, so like this their generation started. So like this their generation started means that blood cells basically which was with the data which was given by that god family person, from that blood cells, to secure that blood cells, this person was basically created and he started his journey also. So like this the creation has started. So like this the human clone started his family. So suddenly basically some person, basically some god family, they basically believe in pujaris and fathers and mollanas. So one of the pujari told that basically this person basically is creating problem to your blood cells, so you can end that generation. So when that the boy basically both basically the person basically which got married, they had the two boys, and that boy also become younger basically, and the one of the boy basically got married. So the pujari basically told that this generation is not supposed to go further. So the government has told that basically what was the reason basically. They told that this blood cells is creating problem to the god family. So basically in real this will never happen, but I'm just telling it basically this might happen. This might happen. So like this, his generation basically he got the married, and the marriage was basically happened to finish his generation. So like that, basically that girl basically specially was created to do the marriage, and she basically done her job basically. She done her job and she finished her she finished that boy generation. How she finished that basically she told that she has finished the generation. How she has done then basically that that was basically the medical research basically will tell when that particular boy is basically will do the second marriage, and when he will not get the his generation. So, like this, basically, the government has got the information that this generation has to end, and this was informed by one of the pujari. So, just taking as an example, in real, basically, this will never happen, and this has never happened also. So, like this, his generation ended, and as per the time was going, that um, the god family person basically which blood cells basically generated this human clone. The doctors was telling that this was basically getting create this particular generation is getting creation problem. Sorry, the generation basically which is created as a human clone, that is creating problem to that god family. So basically how it can be created to god family, how basically the god family will, might get problem to that human from that human clone, because it's a totally different entity, right? But the plan was there, some group basically has done the plan. So like this, that generation was ended. How that girl basically ended the generation, that basically that was basically some issue, the research basically subject. So like this, generation was ended, and that boy also basically suddenly died. Just taking as an example, and really this has not happened. So then basically the god family order basically that pujari on the base of that pujari basically that human clone family was ended. Actually, the problem was that human family and the human clone family and that boy basically which got generation which got young, when basically he got young, that time basically he was basically assumed that he was a software engineer. So that time basically he created some problem to the company. So the due to that company person and due to ego of that company person, and he was basically one of the relative of one of the richest person in India basically. So like this, due to that ego, that human clone person was basically was finished. So here basically the God family was not getting any problem. The problem was the government was getting money from the particular richest businessman. That rich businessman ego hurted, that person's ego hurted, and like this basically due to that ego, that family was ended. So the pujari told that this blood cells is creating problem to the god blood cells. So that was basically not like that. So in real basically like it was like that. So basically there are many decisions basically that government has to take, and government has taken also, and this everything assume that this has done also. Like this basically many decisions are taken by the government, right? Many decisions basically has taken from the government side. So here basically the subscription plan groups who are basically sending the oxygen data for each and every person who are staying in India land. So assume that in India land basically 200 crore people are staying. So for 200 crore people, the oxygens are basically sended. by sent by the is basically sending by the subscription group, basically that is basically World Bank. So one day basically how much oxygen one person is required, if one person requires, that basically by default the subscription plan basically has calculated that, and according to the calculation they says that this money is the oxygen data basically which is required. So if they are spending this much data, right, for a just single person, so they might require the output also, right? The subscription plan basically the World Bank is telling that we are spending this many monies, this many oxygen for one single person. So it's a World Bank, they are not doing any charity, right? So here basically what basically the thing is, here the thing is the government has sold basically the each and every human bodies to the World Bank. That basically by default it's like that, right? By default it's like that only. So the World Bank basically is telling that we are sending the oxygen to the each and every single person, and that basically person is going to generate some energy from his body, and that energy basically we are going to collect. That is basically the energy companies and the power companies and the World Banks, they are going to collect and they are going to reprocess. And one of the example I have taken, that Microsoft is basically one of the energy which is telling that we are going to generate 100 crore apples per month, just taking as an example. So according to that, basically they are sending the data to the each and every person, basically, right? So they have told World Bank that in this many countries, basically, we have Apple Energy inside this particular people's body. So you have to send the data according to that. So according to that, basically one is the Microsoft. Like this, basically many datas are there which basically humans are basically containing, human bodies are containing. So you can just imagine basically, you can't imagine also basically how this each and every parts are basically handling, how the World Bank is handling each and every body parts, each and everything basically, each and every oxygens of the each and every person basically, how they are handling. That basically the World Bank only knows that how they are basically handling. For example, one person is in Vadodara city, and the data basically of his oxygen is getting generated in World Bank. That is basically assume that it's in Ireland. So from Ireland, basically this Vadodara person's oxygen supply is getting generated, and that is basically sent to the power companies of the Vadodara city, sorry, of the India city, sorry, India country. It's not city. So it in India country, basically the in nuclear power plant, the data is getting coming, data is coming, and the data is again reprocessed because according to the local environment, you have to reprocess the data. So like this, the reprocessing happens, and then basically that particular person gets the oxygen power supply. So just see basically how dangerous the world is. Not dangerous, it's very dangerous basically you can say. So per person basically cost of living basically, World Bank is telling it's too basically what to say. It's very high basically you can say. So for that basically they are telling that we need the output also. For that according to that basically the bodies are basically used. So it's very basically if we say basically if we say that human bodies are basically generating the next generation data, then also it would be 100% correct. I have taken one example of the Vadodara city. There is one Pavagad mountain. In Pavagad mountain that was basically created 3000 years before. So 3000 year before, there is one, the mountain was created from that lava blast which was happened in Vadodara city near the currently where basically the Pavadakar mountain is. So previously there was no like mountain. Previously there was no like mountain 3000 years before. Then basically the Pavagad mountain created. Then basically lots of people know the story about the lava blast. So they to remember basically they created one temple basically, so that basically it can be remembered that it's in this place basically the lava blast has happened. For that basically they created Mahakali temple. Basically everybody, each and every Hindu knows basically what Mahakali temple is, what Mahakali god is, and how much powerful it is. So like this, basically the Mahakali god temple was created, and the story basically the behind the Pavagadh mountain and the Mahakali temple was that the here the blast was happened, and blast was happened, sorry, the lava blast was happened. To remember the thing basically, the temple was created, and it's a temple basically. So temple means it is going to secure the Vadodara city. That type of basically the stories are where basically there. But if we see the practically life, each and every basically cities, each and every states, each and every countries basically are connected with the lava tunnel. That basically everybody knows, that lava tunnel basically inside the Earth planet, that is basically connected with each and every countries. So in India, basically, have you ever heard that the lava blast has happened? Have you basically ever heard that lava blast has happened? No, basically. Why? So there might be some reason also behind that. The lava blast has never happened in India country basically. Even the Himalaya basically contains the lava holes, but there also basically never lava blast has happened. So there might be some reason, right? That whole world basically is having the lava blast, but the Asian country is not having the, sorry, the India country is not having the lava blast. So there might be some reason, right? So this reason basically we are going to discuss after some videos. So currently we are currently we are talking that the tunnel basically the lava blast tunnel. So the sand creation happens and the subscription happens. So each and every subscription basically which the World Bank is giving to each and every cities, they know that in this city, in this area, the lava hole basically is there. So the subscription plan that is basically the World Bank knows that this many cities, sorry, for example, I will take one example only. That in Vadodara city, this many trees are there, this many peoples are staying, this many buildings are there, this many buildings are of the this many years, sorry, the of the this many time period. So here basically what came into picture, the construction industry which basically gets creates, they creates the building, they basically do the pattern mark, that if the buildings is getting created in this to this period, you have to give this pattern, and that pattern basically is registered in the power company. So basically, from power company, from that pattern, basically, I'm just taking as an example. Basically, I in real world, basically, the word might be totally different, but here I'm taking as a pattern, that this pattern basically trademark has given by the construction company. So like this same way, basically, the each and every time periods, the buildings are created in the Vadodara city. 90s Vadodara, 90s buildings, 80s buildings, 70s building, 2000s building. So like this, basically many times buildings are basically created, you can say. So according to that, basically subscription plan groups have to send the money. So in short, basically you can say the World Bank have to keep each and every single object data. That this data basically, if we are going to send to this building, then nothing is going to happen. If they send some other build other data, basically other data means the data which is going to fall, which if they send this data, then basically building is going to fall. So you can just imagine the subscription data which the World Bank is passing, how much critical it is. That's why basically the World Bank basically says that whoever basically are working in our group, basically that that person has to be perfectly and number one. For example, World Bank basically it's a set of banks basically. So he should be number one in the banking industry. Then only basically he can work with us, because the data which you are sending to this city, the person basically must be able to understand the which type of objects basically this city is existing, and how basically these objects are created. So entire basically you can say city balance sheet, he should be he should basically should be in front of him basically when he is creating the subscription plan of that particular city. So when the subscription, it's basically not like that the subscription plan has just created in within 5 or 10 minutes. It's not possible, because you have to because the city basically creation always happen. If the creation is happening, then the each and every environment is changing minutes of minutes, because the creation is happening, right? But the major basically the creation, that is basically might have already done long before, right? So boundary basically of the creation that might have happened long before. So this also basically one of the conditions basically you can say of the energy data. So here basically what we are discussing, that the data which the World Bank is going to pass, that is basically very very critical. It's not so easy, the data has to be passed just blindly. So the data which the World Bank is going to pass, that basically has to take care, and basically they are taking care, right? Because in city, basically, if you are passing any data and nothing is happening, and the power supply is basically, if lots of people says that how the power supply is, but the power supply is the very dangerous data basically you can say. Then here basically in Vadodara city, the MGVCL basically is the one power bank. They basically are sending the most dangerous data, because that is basically directly connecting to the each and every human body parts. So you can just imagine the power companies are passing the most dangerous data in the each and every city, and they basically know that in this house basically this data are basically going to pass, and they have yesterday they have passed this data. So they have each and every log buffer basically, right? The data which is getting passed to the certain cities, certain buildings, certain rooms, that rooms logs data basically they have in the certain PCs, right? Whatever the data basically they are passing, that output they are by default they are taking also to the output. How they are taking, that's basically their headache. So it might be some technology, there might be some technology, right? Without technology basically you can't access the data also, and you require the user and password also to accessing the each and every room's data. Each and every room's data, if you, each and every rooms means the body parts energies data. If you want to access any person's body data, then you require the user ID and password basically. So if we are discussing this much, then basically the person basically who might be accessing the data, he also might be up to that level knowledge only, knowledgeable person. So normal person basically can't do this type of thing, right? The person who basically know each and every stuff, he can only basically know. So here basically the human resource basically sorry, human resource department basically comes into the picture, that they have the data of each and every skilled person data. So just to see basically how critical the human resource department has become. The human resource, if anybody asks that this person is basically in which sector basically, so that data basically by default human resource might be having, because they are basically placing that particular person in any of the sector. If he is a consultant also, if he is playing the role of the consultant also, then also that consultant data basically that human resource basically department might be having, because it's a human resource, right? Human resource, that you are sending the human resource data. So human resource data basically you are sending. So you can just imagine the critical data basically, which data is getting passed. So you can just imagine the data structure also of the power sector companies which are basically getting passed. That is also one of the stuff basically you can say. So the power company, the energy company, the nuclear power plant, they are sending the data to each and every cities, each and every areas, each and every buildings, each and every house. They have the architecture of the data, right? Which data in bundle basically they are passing in the power supply, because each and every house basically are directly connected with the power supply only. This is the only way basically you can interact with the each and every house, right? And they are taking the data also like this. Basically, they are giving the data and they are taking the data, right? So like this basically the World Bank is telling that we know basically whenever basically we are creating the uh, whenever basically we are creating the subscription data of each and every cities, that time basically we are scanning each and every objects of the cities. So to scan basically each and every object, you have to physically count the each and every objects basically by default basically. Otherwise, you have to create some technology and you have to collect the objects. That is also one of the way. That is also one of the way. But physical verification happens of each and every objects. That this many trees basically exist in the Vadodara city. This many trees basically exist in the this area. This many buildings basically exist in this Vadodara city. This many human basically, for example, 35 lakh people basically exist in the Vadodara city. So like this in 35 lakh basically in A blood group basically this many datas are there. B blood this many datas are there. So like this basically each and every data World Bank is having. So that basically it's not very so easy data. It's a very critical data basically. Can say. So the power company which they are passing the data, they are not passing the simple data basically, and that job basically is very dangerous job. That's why basically each and every power company that basically the government has take over, and the people basically are doing the work, doing the job in the power company. They are a government employee. They are basically getting good salary. If they are the government company, then basically they can't leave the country also because they are a government employee. You can't leave the country because you are a government employee. After basically retirement basically of the government service, then basically you can go wherever you want to. But until you are doing the job in the government sector, then basically you can't leave the you can't leave the country, right? If it's a official role, then basically you can leave. So here basically the human resource also basically we have taken into the picture that how here critical job basically the human resource are doing. So basically the people who are into the human resource, their job are also basically not so easy basically we can say. They have to understand in each and every sector also basically, but not they have to go, they are not supposed to go in depth level, but one person basically have to think up to the depth level. That is basically the directors of the human resource of the India country. So India country human resource, there might be assume that top 10 human resource person might be there. They have to go up to the depth level, as much depth they can go. That's why basically the human resource software also has created, right? That's why basically the human resource software also has created. That's why basically each and everything is not supposed to be remembered anytime, every time. That's why the human resource software is also created with the help of the human resource directors, managing directors, and the higher level people basically, right? So like this, the human resource software is also created. So it's basically the data basically which the World Bank is passing, that is basically passed by the set of groups, right? Basically, and set of groups basically we have already discussed who are the set of groups. So subscription plan basically which they are passing the data, and the data which they are passing, that are basically they are passing from the World Bank, and World Bank, and if it's connected to the software industry, then basically USA is by default basically in front of the world. And then basically the person told that USA is in front of the world means what you want to say? What you want to say means basically uh, here basically in front of the world, whatever basically the peoples are there, they are basically not doing the actual task, right? So in front of the world it's a USA, but IT industry basically might be handled by some other country also. It might possible because whatever in front of world is there, that is basically not in front of the world. I have taken one example of the earthquake, right? In earthquake basically the in front of the world it's a tectonic plates, but in real basically how earthquake is coming, that is basically from the energies which are basically around the buildings, right? The buildings energy basically get unstable, then basically the earthquake happens. But the earthquake in front of the public basically that is tectonic plates. So to do the proof that this is earthquake came, the entire city basically become unstable, has to create as unstable. So basically, you can just imagine the critical level of the each and every building's data, which is basically passed by the subscription groups. That is basically the World Bank. So that's why basically the World Bank basically is playing the most important role in this world. And the World Bank is directly connected with the subscription groups, basically creation groups, and they are basically by default a consultant only. They don't work in any of the organization, they don't work in any of the companies. They are basically the individual consultants, and they are basically directly connected with a set of governments. So the government basically have the access of each and every consultant data, each and every group's data, that these are all the people's. Basically, if you want to access them, basically you can access it. So for example, I will take one example. Assume that in World Bank is created by the 20 era from the 34 countries. So basically they thought that if any new person basically will come, then basically he might take over each and every stuff of us. So for that, basically, they might have created some special database for that particular group's person. For example, one of the person basically came in World Bank and joined from the India country. So they might have created some special database, right? They might have 100% created some special database, because if he is from India, then basically he might be accessing the certain level of data which he basically might be required, which basically some politics groups basically might require the data. To get that data, basically he is going to access the login screen, and he is going to access that particular certain level of data. So special database might be created long before, right, by these 35 countries. It's by default basically, right? So 35 country basically might have created the database long before for that particular person, basically, right? Because he is going to access the data. So for that, basically, he might be basically, you can't say that this particular data which you are getting from the World Bank, it is 100% correct. It's not possible, right? Because any new person basically is entering the World Bank, he basically will not get 100% data. The data might be 100%, correct, but the level of the accuracy, it might not reach to the certain level basically where you want to reach. So the roadmap basically which the data is going to give, that will not reach to your certain level of data, a certain level of areas. So that by default, but as the time gets passed, when the 35 countries basically gets the trust, that basically, yeah, basically we can trust this person, that basically slowly they are going to share the data. That is basically the by default in each and every company. Basic, for example, I joined Accenture. So Accenture is not going to give me project on the same day basically I have joined. Just taking as an example, basically Accenture is very big company, but it might possible that Accenture might give offer. But it's just taking as an example. Assume that Accenture company has given Sunil R. Nair offer, and they told that this is your roll number, sorry, employee number. Mm. Actually, employee number and roll number, basically we can say that it's same, because in software industry, if you are doing job, then basically daily you are learning something. So it's like student only, right? So assume that Accenture has given employee number and employee car grade, and then basically they have issued one card. And then same day, basically they are not going to give you the project, right? Never ever they are going to give you the project. And big companies basically directly never gives attraction to the client. For example, I am working in the Accenture, and if assume that one manager is working in the Accenture, so he will never get access of the direct client. So he will be directly not working with the client, but in front of him, basically, he is the client. So there are basically many consultant basically working in that Accenture company, who are basically the playing the role of the client, because nowadays big companies are doing this type of stuff only. That why they are doing that basically might be also some other user stories that also we will going to discuss after some time when the time will come. So like this, basically the client is company's employees only. Like this, basically the consultant are doing the job, and then so like this, basically the new project is also not going to give directly, and the client you are not going to access client directly only. It's middleware basically. So same basically it's a World Bank also. But here basically why the 35 countries are telling that we can't take directly this person, because the data which you are going to pass to the each and every cities, that is how much critical. You just see, if you pass this unstable data to this particular city, if one of the building gets unstable data, then basically it's that building is going to fall, right? If the building is going to fall, then basically the investigation is going to happen, and lots of things basically happen. So that basically might convert to some other roadmap basically, because the earthquake system which is created, that is basically the tectonic plates. For that, basically 1 lakh book is already created. World Bank basically, sorry, the 1 lakh books basically for the earthquake, especially, it is already created in the market and it's going in the market. So that also basically is going to connect to that area also. That why basically in this many areas only the earthquake has happened, because the concept is like that, it's a connected with the tectonic plates. Then if it's earthquake will happen, then basically it's going to affect to the entire city. Then basically why this only buildings got affected, this many building is only why it's got affected. So there are lots of questions basically which is going to raise in front of the mm, government, and government is going to by default going to raise the question. But there are lots of things which are not in front of the public. That is basically the tectonic plates in front of the world. Basically it's a tectonic plates. So in real, basically there is no like tectonic plates. There is only the energies, basically energies near the cities, and that special energies are basically created by the World Bank. So basically here we are discussing that World Bank is creating the data of each and every cities, and they are passing the data to the each and every cities according to the requirement they have got. So this is basically 183rd number part of the formula, and in 184 basically we are going to discuss little bit more about the World Bank subscription and the each and every subscription data which the city is going to pass to the World Bank, and in output basically World Bank is giving return the data to the each and every cities, nuclear power companies and energy companies, and few cities basically gets the data with the help of the satellites. And basically, the World Bank is telling that we are basically very clear about the data which we are passing, because we have got the requirement and we have the proof also that this requirement we have got. So this is basically 183 number, and 184 we are going to discuss a little bit more about this topic.